We advise the opinions and views of the hosts and guests do not reflect those of the station.
Hi, welcome back to Business Portal. This is your host for this segment on trends and analysis. A lot of people have been talking about charter change and reforming the Constitution. For this edition, we have our guest from Get Real Philippines. He's also the founder of the Correct movement. What that stands for, we'll get it from him. And talk about constitutional reform. What is it for the Philippine government? And what is it for you? With us is Orion Perez Dumdum, who's going to discuss with us in detail. Welcome to our show, Orion.
Thank you very much, Toti.
Yeah, now, quickly, what is Correct movement? What does it stand for?
Well, Correct is actually about what used to be called charter change. And
Right.
Correct actually means constitutional reform and rectification for economic competitiveness and transformation.
Economic competitiveness and transformation. So how can constitutional reform lead to economic competitiveness?
Well,
that's one. Then we talk about transformations later on.
yes. Well, as we all can see, there is something with our constitution as far as bringing in investors from abroad is concerned.
Okay.
We have these what you call 60-40 provisions, 60-40 protectionist economic provisions, which prevent
limits the ownership of foreigners to a maximum of 60%.
Of 40%. 40%,
Right,
yeah.
right.
So they have to actually find a local partner who is rich enough to actually front 60%.
But it's been the practice here that none of those normally has the capacity equivalent to the foreigner, and they end up being dummies.
Exactly, and that is another form of corruption.
Okay.
Because the dummies, basically, it's a form of rent seeking. They will have to, they'll say, hey, continue to pay me, and I will be your dummy. If you don't pay me, I'm
Right, but
spilling the beans.
It has been working for the longest time. So for so many years, why change it?
I wouldn't
Or,
say
or
it has,
not? It's not. Is it working or is it not working?
the fact is, it hasn't really been working. It's been, it's working at a very limited level, at a very small scale, so that we don't exactly have the amount of jobs necessary to be able to feed our people, which is why for the longest time we've had to send people abroad, you know, to Saudi Arabia or other parts of the Middle East, Singapore.
Okay.
I myself was an OFW in Singapore, just because our job market here is substandard.
Okay, you said you've been an overseas worker in Singapore.
Yes, in
All
Singapore.
right. What is the climate like in countries like Singapore? I mean, do they have this type of problems?
No, well, they don't. They don't. The case of Singapore, for example, they have a very dynamic economy, and that is because their constitution allows free trade, allows free entry of foreign investors.
Right.
So we don't have that, and that's why we're having trouble
Okay.
bringing in investors to the Philippines.
Okay. But within the region in ASEAN, where Singapore is also a member and so is the Philippines, that free trade is also allowed in other countries. So we are also a member of that treaty. So we should benefit as a country.
Actually, quite unfortunately, what's happening is the rest of ASEAN is actually telling the Philippines, can you please get your act together, Philippines? You're supposed to be part of this team.
Yes.
We've already said that everybody should have free, how do you say this, an economic liberalization program
Okay.
to allow free entry of foreign investors, and you haven't done it yet. So they've, you know, if we look at the internet, we look at the news, you know, there are a lot of reports about how other countries that are part of ASEAN have been sort of scolding the Philippines for not following ASEAN guidelines.
All right. In
So-
particular, like what?
This is the one about bringing in foreign investors. Yeah, allowing it to be more free. Whereas in other countries, it's already very free. They allow 100% ownership of businesses in other countries. Here in the Philippines, we still have these issues,
Yeah.
and therefore, you know, we're not up to speed with the rest.
But the antagonist would say, why give up limited resources of the country? I mean, that way we end up being a land that we don't own.
Well, there are many ways of looking at it.
Right.
In my case, for example, I'm not that it's not a big concern for me about land ownership is not that big a concern for me, in the sense that I'm not pushing for I'm not rabidly pushing for foreign ownership of land by foreigners, although I am open to it, and I think it's a good idea to look at. But for me, the more important thing, and the most important thing, is actually allowing foreign investors to come in so that they can set up more companies which can create more jobs for Filipinos, because at the end of the day, we are already sending Filipinos abroad anyway.
Okay. Other than land, the restriction there is also applied to other industries, other sectors like retail.
Yes.
You cannot put up 100% owned retail industry here by foreigners. Same thing with media.
Media is 100% has to be owned here.
100%?
Yeah.
Not even a slight...
It's not even 60-40.
All right.
Media is one of those that is 100% must be owned by Filipinos.
When you say media, you're talking about print, broadcast, and...
Yes,
okay,
all media.
And how is it in other countries?
Well, in many other countries, they don't have it in their constitutions. That's the thing.
There's no restriction.
There are no restrictions in their constitutions. Some of them have legislated restrictions, which means they can be changed anytime. They can be repealed if need be.
Okay. How about banking? I mean, in other countries, do they have 100% owned banks there?
Yeah, they do. They do.
Here
Singapore, for example.
Here we only have as much as only an offshore banking unit. We don't have a full.
Yeah, we don't have.
Except for Citibank, I think, and Hong Kong Shanghai Bank.
Yes,
or Standard Chartered Bank. These are the only 2 or 3 banks that are fully commercialized.
Yes,
and
that's right.
They just got through with it. But other banks, they can't.
They can't. That's the thing. There are restrictions, and again, it's unfortunate that our restrictions.
And these restrictions does not provide jobs.
These restrictions do not provide jobs. They actually force Filipinos to go overseas as OFWs, leaving families behind, leaving children without 1 or 2 parents behind, and then contributing to so many more social problems.
Okay, so what kind of constitutional reform are you advocating, your group?
Okay, well, the correct movement basically has 3 main things in our what we call the 3-point correct agenda.
All right.
The first one is actually the economic liberalization. So when you say economic liberalization, we're talking about getting rid of those 60-40 restrictions. And we're basically saying, just take them off the Constitution. If there is still a need to have certain restrictions for certain certain sectors or whatever, then just do those restrictions at the legislated level. Do it through Congress.
What do you mean? How do you mean by that? Let's say, for example, mining.
Yeah.
Mining is a natural resource in the country. With that type of taking off that restriction, we're allowing foreigners to take full lock, stock, and barrel operation of a mining firm. Is that what you're proposing?
That is, well, what I'm saying first of all is we take them off the Constitution.
Okay.
And then we can continue to have special restrictions, if need be, that are done by Congress.
So if it's going to breach over, let's say, the environment or natural resources are going to be devastated, that's when you put in additional legislation.
Yes. Keep it at the legislation level rather than at the constitutional level, because it's when you hardwire these restrictions in the Constitution, then you don't have the ability to be flexible.
Okay, how do you differentiate constitution level and legislation level?
Well, constitution level means that it's
the primary policy.
Primary policy, and it has to be ratified by the people. Okay. So it takes a long time to actually fix. If there is a problem, if you need to change a comma or a period or spelling or something in the Constitution, you're going to have to change that and then have it ratified by a plebiscite.
Okay, so the people would vote.
The people need to vote. So every time you make little changes, you need to have that big nationwide plebiscite happening to make sure that people say yes or no.
Okay.
But when it's legislated, it's faster because at least the people from the legislature actually fix it.
It could be by sector, could be by district, could be depending on. So how are the other constitutions like in other countries?
Well, I've done a survey of different constitutions, and for the most part, all of the ones I've looked at, I have India's, Thailand's, I've got Japan's, Indonesia's, China's, and a few others.
Yeah.
I haven't seen anything that says something like it has to be 100% owned or 60,
So
40.
none of these advanced economies have any restrictions whatsoever.
That's right, they don't.
Now, how about those poorer countries like Bangladesh and?
I haven't checked the ones of many of the poor countries. Okay, I haven't checked the cases of Bangladesh, but for the most part, many of the poor countries do have these kinds of things. They do have these kinds of restrictions, and in fact, these restrictions become the source of corruption, because that is where a company may say, "Hey, I'd really like to get in," and then some politicians will say, "Okay, sure, you can come in, but you got to pay us."
Yeah, right. But current tycoons, like the taipans that we have in the countries, they were not as big as they were before. But being industrious, I mean, you can talk about the Seas, the Gokongweis, and they're the new taipans, and they have already predominantly occupied our national economy. So with that, and they didn't go to any restriction. They're all Filipino Chinese for that matter. So how would you counter that?
Well, there are very few of them. That's the thing. We're hoping, I mean, it would be nice if we had a lot of other people just like them. If we had so many other businessmen who can create so many jobs, that would be the best. Unfortunately, there are very few of them. I mean, roughly there are only 2% of the entire population of the Philippines that are Filipino Chinese.
All right.
And for the most part.
And they own 80% of the business here, or somewhere to that
well,
effect.
to that effect, there's yes, a huge number of businesses are owned by them. But the thing is, it would have been better if there were actually even more of them. More people who are industrious. It doesn't necessarily mean coming from a particular ethnic group, but what I'm saying is, if we could have more people, more businessmen to actually invest in more businesses and create more jobs, then there would be more jobs competing for Filipinos, competing for job seekers. And when there are more jobs and job seekers, then the wages increase. When wages increase, there is less of a need for people to actually have to go abroad. There's less of a need for people to be, well, underemployed, unemployed, going into crime or other social problems, or some of our women going into prostitution or anything like it.
Correct. But when you say wages increase, does that result to increase in commodities and prices of commodities?
That can happen as well. But then if there are more businessmen as well, then you start finding that they will also step up and create more of these goods.
You mean other products to choose from?
There will be more products to choose from.
That becomes more competitive.
Yes.
And just like the airline industry, they got more airlines now.
Exactly.
And they're coming up with promo fares. It's
yes,
beneficial to the buyers.
I mean, generally speaking, if you have more jobs,
more jobs, more businesses,
more jobs, more businesses,
products to choose from.
Yes, exactly. One of the things is, again, not only are there more jobs when there are more businesses, but there are also there's a higher capacity for production. And the capacity for production means these commodities will not necessarily go up so much in price.
You cited earlier Japan. Was it Japan also restrictive?
They were restrictive before. They were especially during the Meiji Restoration.
Yes,
and during that time,
yes,
the Meiji Restoration, that was a common thing anyway.
Yeah. In India, they went to one time nationalizing the industry.
Yes.
So how good or how bad was that?
Well, that was very, very bad for India. In fact, what happened with India is that they had what I forgot the name of this guy, Raj something. This Indian economist actually said that because of all these socialistic, Gandhian minimalist policies of India, what happened was they ended up having the Hindu rate of growth.
Hindu rate of growth.
Yeah, Hindu rate of growth.
Okay.
Imagine when you say Hindu rate of growth, you're talking about maybe a yogi doing yoga and standing still. So that's exactly what happened to India.
Yeah.
They had the Hindu rate of growth, which was basically standstill.
Okay. Let's talk more about that. We got to pause for a break. You're tuning in here on Business Portal, where we have our guests from the Get Real Philippines and the Correct Movement, Mr. Orion Perez Dumdum. And our topic for this edition is constitutional reform. Do stay tuned for more information.